Hello and welcome to Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Colred. Thank you for joining me. So we know that we have a new Fusion champion coming. The champion hasn't been announced yet, but if you go over to your events page, you'll see that there is a Fusion warm-up event that is ongoing. That means in roughly 3 or 4 days, a new Fusion event will start. So in today's video, I am going to show you how to prepare for a Fusion event and then how to judge whether or not you have the resources necessary to successfully complete any fusion. I hope you're ready for it. Let's get started. Just a quick reminder, every Tuesday I live stream at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. It's called my Takeover Tuesdays stream, and I do free Takeover giveaways for members of my Discord community. So if you are interested in a free takeover or seeing what it's all about, come join us tomorrow at 2 p.m. Also, don't forget to hit the like button for this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and consider joining our Discord community. Thanks so much. Now let's get to the video. Okay, so here I am on hellhades.com, which I talk about all the time. It's a great resource. And on this website, there is a guide and tier list section called Past Fusion Events. This is a really good resource if you are looking to understand how to complete fusions better. So this will actually run you down in chronological order from the most recent fusion all the way to the very first fusion. So it's sort of a history of fusion events. Now, if you're looking at the champions here, you can just click on where it says here in each description. So HH Gaming's Guide to Bazar The Herer's Fusion here. You can just click on that, and that's going to pull up a guide for this particular fusion. Now, HH does a fusion guide for every champion, so you can come here when the new champion is announced, and I'm sure there'll be a guide. But this also helps to just go back and look and see what the past fusion events were all about. The really important thing to, I think, consider is all of the different events and the point totals there, as well as this schedule. So I'm going to pull up a few different schedules from the last several fusion events so you can kind of see the difference in the way the calendars work. Okay, so here is Bamboo's Four Leaf. He was the October fusion. And as you'll notice, this is actually a traditional fusion. We call it a traditional fusion because there are 4 rare champions. And then those rare champions fuse into epic champions, which then fuse into the legendary, in this case, Bamboo's Four Leaf. Now, the real traditional fusion event would actually have 4 different epics. But in this case, we have, 2 different epics. I think it was 2 copies of each. Then we have all of the different events here. Now, the events are pretty much the same every single fusion event. There are slight differentiations in between the different months, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But what you can expect is you will definitely have a tournament for each dungeon. So a dragon tournament. Then you can see here an ice golem tournament. Where's the Fire Knight tournament? There it is, Fire Knight tournament and a spider tournament. By the way, they're always in the same order. I don't know why. They can start with a different one, but they always go dragon, ice golem, Fire Knight, spider. But they could start with any one. So if it starts with spider, it goes spider, then dragon, like that. In addition to those 4 tournaments, you're going to have some Dungeon Divers events. In this case, we had 3 Dungeon Divers events. This has become the norm. So 1, 2, and 3. You have at least 2 champion training events or tournaments. Here we had a champion training tournament in the early part of the fusion and a champion training event at the end. And then in addition, we're getting 3 artifact enhancement events typically. So you can see 1, 2, and 3. In addition to that, there is almost always going to be at least 1 arena tournament. So here we have an arena tournament. In fact, we have 2 arena tournaments here for this one. I think that's typical to get 2. And then finally, we have summon rushes and champion chases. Now, these are the most shard intensive events and tournaments in any fusion. So in this case, we actually have it's the same summon rush here. So it was 1 summon rush at the beginning and 1 champion chase towards the second half. And that is what we see typically. We see a summon rush early on. We see a champion chase towards the back end of the fusion. Now, what do you need in order to complete all of these? Well, what you'll notice is, in this particular case, this extra Malkith Blood Flock was available during the Summon Rush. So if you wanted to go more intensively into the Summon Rush, you could pick up an extra copy of Malkith Blood Flock. The really nice thing about that is it alleviated the need to get at least 4 copies of rares, right? Because each epic is worth 4 rares. So when you do a traditional fusion, this is where sort of the flexibility comes in. Do you pull a rare? Do you pull an epic during the Summon Rush or the Champion Chase? Do you get them somewhere else? You can even get these rares from mystery shards. So there is a little bit of flexibility. And if you get one of those extra champions, that allows you to reduce the resource burden by eliminating one of the events. Remember that the Summon Rush and Champion Chase events are the most shard intensive. You don't want to count on pulling a rare or an epic during either of those events. You want to prepare as if you are going to need to get all 16 rares and all of the 4 epics from completing every single tournament and event. Okay, now here is a different fusion. This is Ugir the Worm Eater's fusion, which was in November. Now, one thing that you'll notice here is that there were no extra events. There were no extra events here. You could get some extra fragments if you won a champion training tournament. You can't expect to do that. So again, we need to plan on getting every single fragment, in this case, from every single event and tournament. So you can't miss a single tournament for, in this case, it looks like 13 days or 14 days. Now, the nice thing about fragment champion events is that you don't have to worry about leveling up the fusion champions in order to get them prepared for the fusion. But the downside is on the Champion Chase, which is, where is it here? Oh, there is actually no Champion Chase here. That's right. Ugir didn't have a Champion Chase. That's unusual. But if there was a Champion Chase event, then you can't use the fusion champions to get yourself some Champion Chase points. We'll talk about that more in just a second. So if you have a fragment event, you need to complete all of the tournaments and events to get the fragments that you need. Okay, now here is Bazar the Herer. That was just the last fusion event in December. And you can see this is actually a hybrid event. So in this particular case, there are no rares, and you collect fragments in order to get the epics. You then fuse the epics into the legendary. So it's a little bit like a fragment event and a little bit like a classic fusion or a traditional fusion. And so we call it a hybrid event. Now, in this particular case, there is a little bit of leeway. If you happen to pull a Bovos Sharphorn during the Summon Rush or the Champion Chase, that would alleviate the need to complete some of these events and tournaments. You do see that there's a Hero's Path down here that gives probably 2 batches. If I remember correctly, it was 2 different batches of 25 fragments. So if you missed one of these events, you could go into the Hero's Path and try to get fragments there. Of course, Hero's Paths are, first of all, this was the first Hero's Path that was ever put into a fusion. And second of all, you don't know which kind of Hero's Path it's going to be or what the point totals are going to be. So it can be tricky to rely on an extra event like this. So again, we wanted to plan to get all 16 batches of fragments, but if you needed the extra 25 or 50, you had a chance here at the Hero's Path. I, in fact, had to use that because I did fail one of these events. I don't know exactly where. I think it might have been at Dungeon Divers, but I was able to get 25 fragments from the Hero's Path to complete Bazar the Herer. Okay, so let's stick with Bazar the Herer here in terms of starting to judge the resources that we need. So first of all, we know that there's going to be a big energy requirement. Now, fusions typically run around 15 days. Some are shorter, some are longer. You have to look out on the calendar and notice that, like here, December 30 and 31st, those were not actually events. There were no events or tournaments. It simply gave you time at the end to level up your Bovos Sharphorns if you needed to, and get that actual fusion for the legendary in that time frame. So there was a little bit of extra leeway here at the end of the event, but you can't count on the resources that you gain during that Saturday and Sunday. That's not helping you complete the fusion, right? That's really not. You should be able to complete the fusion by Friday, December the 29th, if you were planning correctly. So a quick kind of breakdown of the resources you're going to need for each and every event. For every dungeon tournament, you need roughly 2,000 energy. It's a little bit more. It's actually probably about 2,100 energy right now, but call that 2,000 energy. champion training is entirely dependent upon how you prepare for it and how many brews you have. So what I like to say is for each champion training tournament, I want to have a few thousand energy. I want to have many chickens pre-built and ready to go. So I want a lot of champions at 20, 2-star champions at 20. I want a lot of champions, 3-star champions at 30, and maybe some 4-star champions at 40. Even a few 5-star chickens would be useful. So I typically say that you need to get 2 6-stars worth of progression in order to complete a champion training tournament. It's roughly that, depending on how you're doing it. So that means that during these 2 weeks, you're going to basically need to create 4 new 6-star champions. Now, you don't have to do it that way. You don't have to create any 6-star champions. You could just level up other champions, but that's about the amount of experience that you'll need in your champion training tournament. Classic Arena takedowns tend to be relatively easy for those in High Gold Arena. You don't have to do anything special. You can just go ahead and complete your daily arena battles, and you will have no trouble taking down the Classic Arena tournaments. However, if you're in low gold, it may require a little bit of a grind. And if you're in high silver, it may require a bit of a grind. If you are in low silver or bronze, you probably, I don't want to say you can't complete this if you have all of the other resources, but it's going to be a challenge, and you're going to spend a lot of gems on refills in arena in order to get the number of points that you need. So typically what I say is, unless you are at least silver 4, I wouldn't bother trying for a fusion unless you're just really committed to it. And you know you have all the other resources and you're willing to grind, tons of arena and use up gems in order to do it. Now, for the Dungeon Divers events, the Dungeon Divers events are some of the hardest events in any fusion event. And I would say that you typically need at least 5,000 energy here that you're going to dump into the dungeons. So you're going to dump that into the Dragon dungeon, into the Ice Golem dungeon. The nice thing about this particular fusion was that the Dragon tournament and Ice Golem tournament lined up with Dungeon Divers event number 1. 2,000 energy goes into an Ice Golem tournament and 5,000 energy goes into a Dungeon Divers event. But all 2,000 of that overlap that went into the Ice Golem got put into Dungeon Divers. So as a result, this Dungeon Divers event only needed 1,000 additional energy because you could put all 2,000 of the Dragon tournament in and all 2,000 of the Ice Golem tournament in. And that also happened here with Dungeon Divers event 2. All 4,000 energy from Fire Knight and Spider got dumped into Dungeon Divers event 2, which meant I only needed 1,000 additional energy there. But then here at Dungeon Divers event 3, I had used up all of my tournaments, and so I needed 5,000 energy to just complete that on its own. Typically, you will need somewhere between 16,000 and 20,000 energy in order to complete a fusion event. 16,000 is really, if you're really, really efficient, if you're super efficient, you can get it down to about 16,000 energy. More typically, I usually run around the 18,000 energy mark. And you could go as much as like 22,000 if you were pretty inefficient or you needed to do some extra stuff because you weren't well prepared. Now, you pull in 480 passive energy a day, which means over the course of a fusion event, say a 15-day event, you're going to get roughly 7,000 energy if you're fairly efficient with your passive energy. So if you're always running passive energy regen, you're below your max cap, and you don't let it stay at max for too long, you get about 7,000 energy during these 15 days, which means you need to bring an additional 10,000 energy or so, maybe 12,000 energy. Now, you will get energy from login events. You'll get all your daily energy rewards as well. So you probably want to have saved somewhere in the vicinity of 3,000 to 4,000 energy in terms of gems and potions in your mailbox. I tend to like to be conservative on that, and I try to have 3,000 or 4,000 just in potions. And then I'm usually holding on to about 1,500 to 2,000 gems for any fusion event. Okay, now finally, let's get down to the Summon Rush and Champion Chase. In recent fusions, you've had to get 3,150 points during the Summon Rush. That's actually 6 Sacreds, because each Sacred is 500 points. So that's 3,000, and then 150 Mystery Shards typically, or maybe a few Ancients and then some Mystery Shards. So you're going to need at least 5, probably 5 Sacred Shards, if not 6 Sacred Shards for this Summon Rush. And remember, it will happen at the top of the fusion event, which means if you don't have at least 4 right now, you're probably too far away. You might get lucky and pick one up over the next 3 or 4 days, or you might even get one during the summon rush, but you don't want to plan on that. Now, if you have a huge pool of mystery shards, that can alleviate the burden a little bit. So if you have 2,000 or 3,000 mystery shards saved up or more, you can always dip into your mystery shards to go after this summon rush. Remember, it is 1 point per mystery shard, so you could complete this entire summon rush with 3,150 mystery shards. That is an option. I would highly recommend not using void shards for this. Also, not using ancient shards if you can hold on to them. You could use a primal here if there was a good reason to, but I would probably hold my primals as well. So this is usually just sacred shards and mystery shards for me, at least. Now, when we go to the Champion Chase tournament in the second week, this is a little bit different because you can get a lot of points here from various sources. If you have any fusion champions still available to you, you can create fusions, you can complete fusions, and that'll give you Champion Chase points. You get 50 points. I'm sorry, you get, I think it's only 10 points for a rare, 250 points for an epic, and 500 points for a legendary. But you get additional points for voids. So 50 points for a void rare, 350 points for a void epic, and 600, I think, or 650 points for a void legendary. So if you have any Doom Tower fragment champions sitting in your portal, you can leave them there. If you've collected any fragment champions in the past from any sources, you can leave them there until the Champion Chase. This would alleviate the need to do the Champion Chase entirely with shards. Now, one of the nice things about these Champion Chase tournaments is that they often coincide with 2 times shard events. Now, for this particular fusion that's coming up, that Champion Chase will probably coincide with a 2 times sacred event. So if you have any additional sacreds, you could pull them during the Champion Chase. However, if you've used all of your sacreds during the summon rush, then you're going to have to use ancients or voids for the Champion Chase tournament. Again, I highly recommend you don't pull voids or primals. Really, I tend to prefer to do this with ancient shards, or if you have an extra sacred shard or 2, throw them at that Champion Chase tournament. Again, if you can get any points from fragment or fusion champions, you definitely want to do that. Also, look for your login reward champions. If you have any login reward champions that hit around that date, then maybe you can even plan like 1 day of inactivity if you need to push that reward a day. And that could be something you could even do before the fusion to make sure that you line up during the fusion and you don't miss any of the fusion days. All right, so all told, here are our totals. We need somewhere between 16 and 20,000 energy. We're going to need about 20 million silver per artifact and enhancement event, which means 60 million silver overall, except you will get silver during the entire tournament. So typically I like to start with a minimum of 20 million silver, preferably 25 million, but that should be enough to get you started. We're going to need a minimum of 6 sacred shards and probably hundreds upon hundreds of mystery shards. And for the Champion Chase tournament, depending on if you're doing it solely with shards or not, I like to keep somewhere between 60 and 80 ancient shards for my Champion Chase tournament. Okay, so let's say you are close to that number of resources, or you know that you have the number of resources. What can you do here to get ready for the fusion event? What can you do to prep right now for the next 3.5 days? So the very first thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we are holding on to and compiling our resources. You can notice I have a ton of energy saved here. In fact, if I go to gems, silvers, and potions, you can see I have all the energy from my last CVC available. I will have to pull this before the fusion starts, but this energy is going to go towards my prep for the fusion event. The actual potions, I have roughly 40 energy refills saved up. I also have a few hundred auto battles saved up, and that's always nice. You can use RSL Helper if you're doing that, or if you have an auto clicker, if you're using BlueStacks or something like that, you can use that. But auto battles are also a nice little luxury because it's very quick. As far as arena tokens, you typically don't need those for the fusion event, unless you are in, like I said, maybe you're in high silver or even if you're below, then you're going to need a lot of arena refills. I do have plenty of gems here, so I'm not too worried about the energy count, but I don't know that I'll have to break into those gems at all. I do like to have a little bit of extra gems in reserve, so if I need to during the Champion Chase, because there is a bit of RNG involved, I can come in here to the gem shop and buy these big shard packs for 900 gems. So usually I like to have 2,000 or 3,000 gems put aside for that reason. I don't want to break into those gems if I don't have to. So you can see as I'm carrying about 6,000 gems, almost 7,000 gems, and that feels really comfortable to me. But you can certainly do a fusion with less. I feel like 2,000 gems, maybe 1,500 gems is around the minimum that I feel comfortable with trying a fusion event. And if I'm at 3,000 or 4,000, I feel really good. So if you only have a few gems right now, spend the next several days making sure that you are hoarding your gems, collecting all of your gems, and not spending them for any reason, hopefully. Now, when it comes to other resources, brews are important. They help you during the champion training events and tournaments. I like to carry about 300 to 400 brews of each affinity. I can usually not spend all of those. So if I want to do a fusion, I can usually spend somewhere between 200 and 250 brews for a fusion event, but I like to have at least 300 to 400 just to have some cushion. You can also see I have a ton of 4-star chickens here, and I have some 3-star chickens that I'm leveling up. I like to keep as many of these on hand, and I'm not going to be converting these in the near future. I will be leveling up some of them in campaign. I'm going to be doing a lot of campaign in preparation for this fusion event, and there are a few reasons why. One is mystery shards. The more mystery shards I can get, the better off I'm going to be. 2 is I want to level up these chickens and get them ready for the champion training tournaments. And then 3 is I need silver. You can see I'm only at 5.8 million silver right now. I would like to, in the next 3 days, get this number up to 20 million silver. I think that that's possible. One other source of silver is the forge. So I may be, clearing out my forge. You can use up these rare materials if you have them. So if you are now making 5 and 6-star forge pieces, then you don't need the rares for those. You do need the epic materials, right? Now, if you're still making 4 and 5-star pieces, you have to be careful. You don't want to run yourself out of these. But one of the things that you can do during the fusion event to get more silver, if you need it, is forge materials and sell them here. There will be a CVC during the fusion. I highly recommend that you hold on to your forge materials until the CVC. Then forge all your gear during the CVC. That way you get even more points and more value for that resource. Okay, finally, another thing that I'm going to be doing right now is I am going to be collecting Ascension Potions. Now, what I would like here, I don't know. If this is a fragment event, I'm not going to need these potions. But if it is a hybrid event or a traditional fusion event, we're going to need a lot of potions. And you don't know which affinity the champion is going to be or which affinity the rares and epics might be. So what I like to do is I like to have 40 of each of the superior potions. So the big potions, you want to have roughly 40 of each. If you have 20, that's probably fine to get started. You're going to have 2 weeks, so you will have 2 full rotations of potion keeps, but that's going to require more energy. Remember, any energy you're putting into the potion keeps, you're not putting into the tournaments, into the dungeon divers, so on and so forth. In addition, I usually like to have around 100 of the greater potions, so that's the medium potions. So what I'm going to do is over the next 3 or 4 days, I will have a full rotation. I'll be able to get into every potion keep except the void potion keep. And I'm going to be farming, probably I'll spend 200 or 300 energy each day in the potion keeps just to make sure I'm in a really comfortable place. I don't worry too much about the arcane potions. I do probably want to farm this just a little bit, but I'm not too worried about this because you don't need as many of these. And then the other thing is this is open every day, so you can always get in here if you need to. One last note about the Fusion Warm-Up event itself. It requires that you upgrade artifacts, so you're going to have to spend a little bit of silver to do that. But if you have any events, this event or any events that have rewards for energy, you want to leave those uncollected. Because when the event expires, those will go into your mailbox and they'll usually be there, I think, for 6 days. You get 6 days to use those rewards. So this is a way you can actually save a little bit more energy for the fusion event. Or if you need to get into the potion keeps or grind campaign, you could use this energy for that. But again, as you can see, my energy is actually over the cap. So what I'm going to do for the rest of the day is make sure I stay under cap and get as much energy as I can into potion keeps and campaign. Get that silver number up a lot higher and make sure I have all the mystery shards that I need and all of the potions, the various potions I need regardless of what affinity the fusion champs may be. So just for a point of comparison, this is my noob versus pro account. You can see I am level 61 and I am at 140 days of login. So I certainly feel like I could complete this fusion that is coming up. You'll see I have 44 ancient shards saved. I have 7 sacred shards saved. I did not pull during the last 2-time ancient shard event. Now, if you did pull during the 2 times ancient shard event this weekend and you're out of ancient shards, you may struggle to complete the champion chase later in the fusion unless you have a lot more sacred shards than 7. I'm probably going to use, 5 sacred shards during the summon rush, and I'll get the rest of the points through mystery shards, even if I have to pull 650 mystery shards. That will allow me to save 2 sacreds for the champion chase later on, which is during a 2 times sacred shard event. So any sacred shards I can save for that event, I would like to. Again, we'll have to see the actual schedule when it comes out in the next couple of days, because it may be a little bit different than we've seen in the past. Ugir did not have a champion chase tournament, so we'll have to see if that gets repeated. I don't expect that to be the case. I think the champion chase and summon rush are pretty much a lock for this fusion. Okay, so that is it for the next couple of days. Get into your campaign, grind up those food champions, get some silver. Also get into the potion keeps if you don't have enough potions, and make sure you have a good stockpile of mystery shards. By the way, just one last tip here. If you have the quest every day to pull 3, to summon 3 champions, don't do a 10 pull of mystery shards for the next couple of days. Just pull the 3 shards. That'll help you save up a few more mystery shards. And you never know. There are definitely times when a fusion event can come down to a few hundred mystery shards. So the more mystery shards you have, the better off you're going to be. All right, definitely let me know in the comments below if you found this helpful. If you have any questions that I can answer in advance of the fusion that can help you get prepared, also ask those in the comments below. I'm happy to answer those. If you want any more advice, I would highly recommend you join our Discord community. Ask your questions in the Discord community, because not only will you get an answer from me, but you'll get an answer from the community. And there are tons of really good players in our Discord. So that's a great resource for players, especially who are trying to advance in the game and perhaps complete their first fusion. Thanks so much for hanging out. I have been Colred, and I will see you in another video soon.